guys, Roxxi here. Just a quick note to apologise for how crusty my audio is this episode. Please put up with it as best as you can, and I promise it is fixed for the next one. Bye!
Hi, welcome to Scared in the Name of Science, Season 1, Episode 4, Hellhounds and the Black Shuck. I'm guessing by that little enthusiastic squeal you're familiar with the legends?
Only because I'm obviously we discussed what stories you're each going to do. I'm really excited to hear about Undead Floofers.
Yeah, I'm very excited you let me have this episode.
Look, we both know that you're the dog person, I'm the cat person, whatever pets we may have at home.
Definitely, I agree. So, dogs have long been regarded as kind of friends and companions to humans throughout history. We've selectively bred them and domesticated them to stay by our sides and help us with tasks like hunting, herding, and defending. I think on that note, it's unsurprising that they would also appear as such a key figure in our collection of folk tales and spectral sightings. However, there are quite a few different types of spectral hounds. Today, we're going to be focusing on the Hellhounds.
Out of curiosity, why did you decide Hellhound to be your main focus out of all the different options?
Well, I think there is a special kind of terror associated with the idea of being chased and hunted by something as terrifying as huge, massive, I think as much as we love dogs and, we attach all kinds of personalities to them, which they absolutely have. I've grown up around dogs. I had a little terrier who was the light of my world. She was a feisty little being. I think there's something innately terrifying about friend turned foe.
I like that. Interesting.
And I think with Hellhounds, that's kind of a little bit of where the terror, I think, can be. We do, unless you're terrified of dogs, because there are some very good reasons to be. I think most people do kind of see dogs as quite, friends, companion animals, like I said, really.
Do you know what? That is just such an interesting idea. This sort of is scary to us because we consider them such companion animals. And then it switched to me this thing that is suddenly definitely not friendly. That's such a curious idea. Oh, I love that. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So, Hellhounds have got a lot of different names depending on the kind of regions that they've been spotted in. In East Anglia, there's the famous Black Shuck of Norfolk. In northern England, they've been referred to as Barghast. In Lancashire, a hellhound might be called the Trash Hound, which is a bit nasty, actually. I think that's really mean.
I'm the Trash Hound.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be very frightened being chased by a trash hound. I'd be a bit embarrassed to be coming out with that one. But they've also had names like Skriker and Striker. So there's an awful lot of names to describe the same or, similar beasties of the hellhound variety. In some regions of the UK, the spectral hound has been referred to as pamphlet. Should be familiar. Rox, have you heard of any other variations, or when you were growing up, did you know if they had any kind of names attributed to them?
Well, speaking of pamphlet, obviously I've heard of the Grim from Harry Potter. I'm not really doing that too much time though, but that's where I heard about it the most. Barghast does sound particularly familiar. I don't know if it's in another popular culture thing, what was it called?
Pathfinder.
Yeah, Pathfinder. Yeah. I was actually thinking Resident Evil, but
fair.
Totally different. I've also heard you mentioned Skriker and Striker. I think I've also heard of it as a Striker or something like that. So I think there is a lot of different variations on it, but the only one I can particularly think of is the Black Dog with Dartmoor and things like that, and that's the only one I've heard of. I'm from up north of England, and I'm sure we do have our own version of this. I could not tell you anything all about it.
I think the Grim is one of the more popularised variants.
Yeah, I was speaking to a friend who was talking to me after they listened to the first episode, and he was like, wait a sec, you talk about warhead brushes and you've not mentioned the Grim. And I was like, well, yeah, but that's because that's fake for Harry Potter. The Grim is, something completely different. I'm going to be talking about it. It's a whole horses.
I was going to say.
I'll have a chance.
So, for this episode, I'm going to be kind of mainly referring to them as a hellhound, just because, it's easier to keep track of it that way. So, the Hellhound has been described as being a large, black, spectral dog with long, unkempt fur and huge, fiery eyes. It is said that those who hear its howls are fated to die. Doesn't sound so made up now. Though there are some stories of hellhounds setting upon lone travellers, such as the Barghest of York. From our previous episodes, I think we're kind of starting to see a little bit of a pattern of prophetic qualities to spectral visits. What do you kind of make of this, Rox? Do you think maybe your previous hypothesis about kind of prophetic visions and apparitions, do you think maybe prophetic visions are linked to all paranormal events?
See, I was thinking about this. I've been talking about it a lot more, and a little bit of me kind of put some doubt here about the fact that a dog could be a prophetic vision or a warning sign or an omen. Because if you remember back to Hosea Pope, one of my things of it was that it uses its voice or presence to indicate, like, the warning. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, well, it could just be coincidence. You see this thing and you think that there's this connection, and then the thing happens. That is not direct cause and effect. It's implied. It's not actually real. So on sort of more consideration for this, I sit there and I go, it's a dog. We've got our own meanings onto a lot of things with animals. So I'm not 100% sure that you could see a ghost dog and assume that's a vision for your death, because what's a dog got to do with death? Like, with the Phantom funerals, it was very different, because if you look in the coffin and you see yourself in a coffin, that's kind of telling you, I will be dead soon. And, like, based on what you see, maybe it shows that you'll be a very old person, and so you'll be dead in a very long time. Maybe it's you right now, and therefore you're like, oh, I'm going to die tomorrow. It's just a dog.
See, you say it's just a dog, but hellhounds and fiery eyes, I think there's a certain link between the dogs dragging you off to hell.
I mean, is there any proof of someone being dragged to hell?
I think if we're discussing the paranormal, proof is the very tricky subject.
I don't know, man.
I think it's a little harsh to kind of turn your nose up at the idea of premonitions attached to hounds when we're looking at premonitions attached to ghosts in general.
It feels like we swapped sides to this one.
Well, I'm just arguing for the sake of, arguing.
Yeah. Speaking of hell, we're playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I just think that to sort of narrow down my thoughts earlier, I think realistically there needs to be something concrete that definitely tells you it is a warning or a premonition, rather than it just being circumstantial. Oh, you're in the same area. Maybe I need to revisit that with Hosea Pope a little bit, but I don't know. I don't think, oh my god, a black scary dog, I'm going to die. Proof in of itself,
I mean, fair enough. I think, obviously I just think it's a dog, but it's hard for me to argue this case when I don't believe it, but...
Yeah, I guess you'd need even believe me being like, nah, it's rubbish.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
we do agree. So kind of getting back to the hellhounds themselves and discussing the howls and all that sort of thing, I think quite fascinatingly, in the Crossfell, which is in the county of Cumbria, there is said to be evil spirits such as the Barghest, the Hellhound, and demons who wail across the fells. A very quick search reveals that in this region there is a named wind called the Helm's Wind. I think this is the only named wind in the UK, and it is said to produce a shrieking sound. If any listeners have ever experienced the Helm Wind, please do drop us a message and let us know if it really does sound like a shrieking sound. I would be really fascinated to hear your experiences in that area. I do think, however, that at some point or another, all of us have experienced the sound of a howling wind or a whistling wind, and to be honest, there is a really eerie quality associated with it. My mind, upon hearing it, immediately conjures up that classic image of the black leafless trees being whipped around in the dead of night with thick mist swirling in the ground. And I can fully understand how someone in that area could be frightened enough to misinterpret the sound of wind howling for ghostly cries. Rox, have you ever kind of heard the wind howling being spooked by storm noises?
Yeah, I am a perpetually spooked by storms kind of person. My fiance is obsessed with all things like the element of air, the wind, storms, everything like that. They are the first person to be like, throw the windows open, let's sit and watch. And to a certain degree, I'm with them. I love a good storm. I like thunderstorms. I follow like lightning tracker all the time and stuff like that. But if it is really, really bad to the point where like I can hear it moving the house and stuff, I get really, really freaked out and scared. I don't know if it's like the fire sign in me that's like, oh my god, I'm gonna get blown out. Like, just, if it's too strong, I'm not here for it.
I see. I'm not gonna touch on the fire sign and comment. I'm gonna move swiftly past that.
Yeah, okay, water sign, whatever.
Okay, right. I do, I agree with that kind of assessment. Definitely, when a house is creaking, I think it's typical to be frightened of it. I've never really been caught outside, say, in a proper howling wind.
Oh, have you not?
Not like, do you know, I probably have been as a child on the moors, to be honest, and probably didn't mean anything to me. I was probably thinking, can't wait to go home and have a hot chocolate or something. I'm not responsible for whatever happens. I'm a child, which was a very common thought. I was like, yeah, this isn't my problem. Someone else can deal with this. But I think to be outside in the howling storms when it gets a bit dark, I think that could genuinely be quite a horrifying experience.
I know I've driven down the M4 several times when it has been like the
windy.
most torrential rain, wind, sheets blowing across your car. You're feeling your car like swerve in the road because it's being buffeted by wind.
Definitely.
And that is a genuinely terrifying experience. You know that despite the fact you're in control of the motion, something bigger than you, able to move you against your will, no thank you. Absolutely not. I'm glad I'm not the main driver anymore.
So, I think that with wind howling, I think it's quite reasonable to be conjuring up images of being,
it's a terrifying force of nature. It would make absolute sense for us to attribute more things to it and maybe we can understand a little bit better than just, okay, here's this thing we can do nothing about and it's scary.
I agree. Let us discuss perhaps the most famous of hellhounds in the UK, the Black Shuck. Now, the Black Shuck is typically described in the same way as the other hellhounds, with mentions of it being a huge black dog that lets out howling shrieks. But interestingly, in some depictions of the beast, it is seen with a singular glowing red eye, quite like a cyclopsy.
Which is the one?
Yeah. I've seen a couple of artworks.
What?
Of it.
I asked these artworks, roughly what period of time did they date from?
Yeah, please ask me that, I didn't know.
Because I was just going to say, like, if it dates from, like, onwards having a singular eye, then that could be easy to explain away by somebody being like, oh my god, a car! And not seen a car before. Whereas, I think if it's pre, then what?
I do think that quite modern, to be honest. I wasn't really in the mood for discussing various kind of people's drawings of it, but there have been a few depictions of it with singular glowing red eye. I do think the typical is two eyes.
Yeah,
I just thought it was an interesting side note.
That's so weird. I've never heard of the singular. That's wild.
So what I think is interesting about the Black Shuck is that there exists a pamphlet titled "A Strange and Terrible Wonder" by Reverend Abraham Fleming, and he writes of an encounter with a beast. I have sent you a link to a PDF of this pamphlet. I think it would be kind of cool if we could put it up on the social medias after, so people can have a look at the pamphlet itself. But I am going to relay a kind of summary of the event. On Sunday, the 4th of August, in 1577, there was a great storm. And again, the idea of a storm and whipping winds kind of link me back to the idea of the Helm's wind. So this great storm hit the town of Bungay. The storm was so violent and unusual that it terrified townspeople into thinking that it was the arrival of doomsday, and the church itself was quaking from the force. In the dark of the storm, a black dog appeared together with a flash of fire and immense speed and ran across the church and wrung the necks of two knelt praying parishioners. In another church, in a different town on the same day, a black dog swung down from the main beam of the church and killed 2 other men, a boy, and burnt the hand of another person.
Sorry, we've got Spider Dog?
So yeah, he is, he's flinging himself across the church, he's appearing in, flashes of flames.
Right, this is going to probably sound wild. The flashes of flames, I understand more than, like, parkouring it around the roof of the church.
I am curious how exactly the swinging down from the main beam. Are we talking paws across it, or are we talking swinging down by biting it and flinging? I don't think it goes into much more detail, I'm afraid.
Parallel, just interesting eventually.
Yeah. So, interestingly, pamphlet states that there are lots of eyewitnesses who all reported seeing the same thing, and the church in, I think it's Blytheborough Church, still has the wooden door with the alleged scorch marks embedded onto it.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually really cool. That's like
allegedly.
What?
Allegedly.
Okay. We need to see that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think a field trip to Norfolk is in order.
Cool.
What is also very, very interesting is that in 2014, archaeologists were digging at a site where an ancient abbey had stood and uncovered the bones of a 7-foot dog.
What? Sorry. A 7-foot dog?
7-foot dog. Now, I'm not talking 7 foot from, like, paw to head. I think we're talking, maybe still on his hind legs.
Okay.
However, as fun as that little fact is, a bit of radiocarbon dating was done and indicated it was from a time period around 60. I think it was quite varied, to be honest. It was quite a few different time periods. It was, I want to say, 1650 to 1690, 1730 to 1810, or post 1920. Which, to be honest, I don't really understand much about radiocarbon dating. If maybe someone with a little bit more expertise could kind of talk through why there was such a range of time periods, that would be great.
I can't tell you why there's such a range of dates, but I know how radiocarbon dating works. Do you?
No, not really, to be honest.
Okay, so I only know this because I actually did like an AS level in archaeology because I wanted to be one when I was a kid. So
sick.
Here we go. So radiocarbon dating, as far as I can remember, is the process where like everything ever has like a certain amount of atoms that are differing over time, which as a chemist you should know this, that you can work out the rate of decay based on the atoms that are left from where the starting point should have been or something like that. So if you then like work backwards from what's left, you can work out when it originated from or something like that. I'll double check and verify, but I'm pretty sure it is something to do with like counting how many atoms have decayed at half rates and single rates and things like that, working backwards essentially. So that could explain why there are different dates. Maybe the bones are dating from different periods of times when they've tested it in multiple different places. They've received different dates. It could also be that the texture of the acidity of the soil affects the carbon dating potentially, because obviously if it's in a more acidic part of the soil, that will make the decay rate a lot faster, which could then affect the carbon dating. I could be wrong. Any archaeologists out there, please clarify, because this is like 10 years ago knowledge that I'm using. I believe that's right.
Fair enough. Whatever the reason, it shows that the skeleton was nowhere near old enough to be the Black Shuck.
Yeah.
What I do have to admit, though, when I did initially see the very clickbaity headline, there's 7-foot skeleton of huge dog discovered near, church where Black Shuck was, I was thinking, that being said, in my opinion, the discovery of bones, even let's just say hypothetically they did belong to the Black Shuck, that would immediately disprove the whole story in my eyes. Because a dog that magically appears out of nowhere surely should not be able to leave a physical body behind.
That is a very, very good point. Is it from hell? Should it not spoof back into hell?
Spoof, yeah. You'd think. I mean, that sounds about right. It sounds about right. It's hard to apply kind of logical thoughts to the magical, essentially. But yeah, it doesn't make sense that if it appears out of nothing, it wouldn't return to nothing. It would doesn't make sense to leave a physical body behind.
But then, if we're talking physics, energy cannot be created or destroyed, so would it make sense for it to go into nothing? Would it not leave behind something?
Well, where would it have come from in the first place?
Well, I mean, I don't know, enough then having such sort of extra planes and hell and heaven and stuff like that. Like, it could have come from somewhere else up here or sideways here, but then if it's been killed here, it would have to leave whatever's left of it because it can't get back with the energy to transport it back.
Yeah, but it would be interesting then that it would be like a biological form that would decay to bones.
True.
So I think it would be difficult to argue with semantics on that one.
Maybe.
But what I do think is quite an interesting contrast to the story of Black Shuck is the presence of a church grim. So in T.F. Thistleton Dyer's book, The Ghost World, he briefly touches on the topic of church grims, which is said to be animals that have been buried on church grounds. They can be a dog or a pig or a horse, and they protect the church by scaring away the sacrilegious. So just because a spectral hound appears does not necessarily a hellhound make.
See, that's really interesting to me there, that there are specific animals, because obviously this is probably a really tangent thought, but obviously there are specific animals that are associated with witchcraft and heresy and heresy people like that. Obviously, I don't believe witchcraft is heresy, that's my own personal belief. And I'm just interested to see if I would be interested to know if there are specific animals that are like religious, in quotation marks, compared to animals that are sacrilegious, again, in quotation marks.
Being a black cat of sorts, not to be overly stereotypical of a witch.
Exactly, yeah. Cats, reptiles, bats, things like that, yeah. So I'd be interested to see, because of the ones you've listed there, dog, pig, or horse, are all like, this is going to sound wild, but like utility animals?
No, I agree. They're all quite typical farm yardy animals. I think that would make sense for like a local parish.
Yeah.
They're not going to get a bear out of somewhere to protect the church. You've got to kind of make do with what they got.
So you both wonder if maybe the reason why those animals were picked is because they're the ones that we've domesticated properly. Like, I don't know if you've ever had a cat, but no part of me will tell you that a cat is fully domesticated. Like, they've trained us, if anything. So I do wonder if there is that difference in, we've been able to train this animal and control it, therefore it is correct and good and right. But these ones, that we can't control and train.
I mean, cats are quite untrainable. The only cat I've ever liked has been your darling cat.
Oh, my Mimi.
Yeah, she was a treasure, and she held the title of the only cat I've liked. So
she was a good girl. Rest in peace.
So, moving on to other tales of hellhounds, there's also been some reported in Devon. In Witchcraft and Folklore of Dartmoor by Ruth E.S.T. Ledger-Gordon, there is an account from 1958 where a gentleman writes of a particular childhood memory. He was staying in an old house between Widdicombe and Postbridge, and he was set upon by a pack of black dogs running loose. He reports being absolutely terrified of being bitten, but what I think is quite interesting is that these dogs were allegedly completely invisible to his mother and sister. Dartmoor is also home to the Stone, which has the fascinating story of the Hounds or Wish Hounds attached to them. Anyone who is familiar with Dartmoor would immediately think about how unpredictable the weather is up there, which again pulls back to the howling winds and swirling mists, and how it's quite easy to understand how fear and disorientation can turn into terror, especially if being hunted when you're in a wild environment. So the Hounds were described as being black or skeletal with fiery eyes that glowed red. These hounds travelled in packs and were said to hunt across the moors. Interestingly enough, these hounds were said to be frightened of the River Dart and were never able to cross the river.
You know what? That's a common superstition about a lot of creatures associated with hell. Witches were apparently so witches were supposed to not be able to cross running water, same as vampires. In like old texts. Obviously with witches, part of the way you sort of test it out is by putting them in running water to see if they drown. And then with like vampires and stuff, you're supposed to scatter the ashes after you burnt them into running water so they can't like piece themselves back together and stuff. Yeah. So it's interesting that there's another creature from hell that apparently running water. I've got to wonder if it's that purifying effect again.
Yeah, I mean, very possibly.
Mm.
You know, the tale of, the hunt across the moors, the tale of a hunt is a recurring theme in folklore across many different cultures and many different parts of the world.
Interesting.
In Welsh mythology, Cwn Anwen are the spectral hounds of Anwen. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, I did try my best. And they take part in the wild hunt. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail here, as the wild hunt is its own fascinating legend and it deserves a full episode dedicated to it. But I will say that the coming of these dogs, and again their howls, was said to be an omen of death. The Gwishgi is sometimes referred to as the Cwn Anwen, and like the Cwn Anwen may sometimes be in a pack of hounds. To try and differentiate, I will only use Cwn Anwen when discussing the wild hunt, and I think from my reading that the Gwishgi kind of refers to a separate entity, since the omen of death is not necessarily mentioned in association with the Gwishgi. So once again, this is a big black dog. I think it's described as being like a black wolf or a black mastiff with blazing red eyes. And in some stories of Gwishgi, it prowls around on lone roads at twilight, usually looking for travellers. I think there's been a couple of cases mentioned in the area of Wrexham. So the origin of the name Gwishgi has two possible roots, either kind of deriving from wild or twilight, both of which could be applicable. And what's interesting is, hellhounds also get reported to be seen as crossroads as well. There's a crossroads between Bridgend and Laelston where a phantom hound is said to appear every single midnight and trots along the road before vanishing. So going back to the paranormal database, which is kind of where we read a lot about these accounts. There's an account on there from the 18th century that reports a horse-sized wolf that kind of wreaked havoc in a region by eating livestock, dogs, humans. And looking at that, the idea of wolves and these big kind of dogs attacking travellers and everything, I can really understand how these creatures have come to be such an integral part of folklore in the UK. The idea of large dogs themselves are not really an outlandish creature, and if you consider the fact that once upon a time there would have been wolves to worry about in the UK, I can understand how we've kind of taken the idea of dogs and wolves and we've made them into these kind of demonic spectres that hunt you through the night and instill terror in you, especially if you're in the wilder areas such as mountains and moorlands, where you can become disorientated, frightened, there's unpredictable weather, howling winds, and night is setting in. I think it's only human nature to also be worried about being hunted through the darkness too. What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I think this is a tricky one for me because, obviously, Hellhound is so associated with religion. I don't know how much stock I put in it because a lot of the time I do think a lot of religious stories come from the idea of control. I worry that a lot of these stories come from someone being like, cool, if I can keep people away from this area, I can get away with whatever I want to do, or I can deal with, I can control them now or something like that. I don't know. But the idea that they're an omen, I don't see any evidence for that from what you discussed so far. I'm really fascinated though that there are several different accounts of them physically attacking humans or eating humans. That to me is the most convincing evidence, because there is no way to discredit, cool, this person was here one day, not here the next.
Right.
Something's happened there,
The something most likely being just a big dog, I think that people can panic and associate all kinds of untold horrors with quite reasonable common creatures. I think a dog attacking someone is a lot more likely than there being a hellhound. I don't think, well, obviously I don't believe in hellhounds at all, but it's probably just a dog, and I think that the howling winds, if people are frightened, then there doesn't even necessarily need to be a dog present. They just might think of one because they're frightened, and they hear a howling and it's dark and there's masses shifting around that they can't see out there.
I mean, I will say, obviously, when you hear a dog howl and then several others respond, that is a very chilling moment.
It depends on the environment. It can be.
Oh, really? You think it's so?
Well, sometimes, yeah. I mean, When I was very, very little, we had a dog who used to howl along to the harmonica. In certain settings, in the comfort of my house, looking at a dog I know, and next to someone making howling noises, fine. In the dead of night, when I don't know where I am, lost, then I think howling dogs would be a worry.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to talk about how when I lived in Cardiff, one night I was in my house, it was dark, it was quiet, and all of a sudden I hear like one dog start howling, and then like across the community another dog popped off to start howling, and then 2 or 3 others joined in. I'm not gonna lie, shivers. Like, absolutely, that was an eerie feeling that definitely went down my spine, because it isn't something actually that you hear an awful lot unless you do have a dog.
Yeah.
So to hear several around the neighbourhood all kick off at the same time, you're like, something's going on.
Yeah. Is that necessarily fear of the dogs themselves, or fear of what the dogs are howling at?
That's a good point. It's a good point. Don't know. I've really enjoyed learning about shucks and hellhounds, and I'm fascinated that they're all over the country as well. There are Welsh versions too.
Yeah, I think they're fascinating. I love it as a story. I just, to be honest, I just quite like a dog. It's just fun researching about dogs. I do think, though, that, well, obviously I think that all of this is my language, but anyway, the hellhounds in my mind, because I think there's, a normal fear to be had of dogs. I don't fear them. I know some people do. So seeing, a big old dog, I imagine, could be frightening for some.
I wonder as well, actually, how much of this idea of hellhounds actually originates back to like Greek and Roman mythology. With his name isn't Spot, but it is Spot in Greek.
Cerberus?
Well, I did. Yeah, obviously with the huge 3-headed dog that protects the underworld. So part of me does wonder if these stories come from that, and maybe they were adjusted during the Christianization of Europe, and instead of this idea of this big dog was made to be very, very vicious, and therefore something in order to change that story a little bit.
Oh, I don't know. Like was mentioned previously, dogs are companion animals. We've had them alongside us for so much of our history now. It only makes sense that you make stories for them. And, if in your story something needs to be guarded, what's a better guard than your best friend, but huge?
No. I do think, honestly, a couple of episodes ago we mentioned about how with white ladies, people might just exaggerate their tales.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I do think when this might be what happens here is someone's got bit by a Yorkshire Terrier, and then they're like, no, it was a hellhound. And it's like, yeah, okay, whatever, dude.
I don't know. Such in Chihuahuas, I'd certainly make the call for that they could be described as hellhounds.
You're not going to describe a Chihuahua as a 6-foot Doberman.
You might have to, depends on the damage they do. It's easier to live that down.
Yes.
But no, I do think you're right. As with any story, exaggeration is, of course, a massive thing.
Yeah.
Everyone who tells a good story exaggerates certain aspects of the story. So I think we'll be leaving that there today. I've had an enormous amount of fun researching the Black Shuck. If anyone has anything and they kind of want to add to the discussion, or they even had a experience with a hellhound, we'd love to hear about it. Just contact us, let us know, guess in anything. But yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Yep, and don't forget to use the hashtag Sitnos, SITNOS, when you do, so we can find anything that you have please make sure to like and subscribe. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Yeah, have a good time, guys. Bye.
Bye.